yesterday, the world became just a little bit richer when news came and was announced that Watergate figure, he was a co-conspirator, G. Gordon Liddy, 90, died. And and initial reports had it that he didn't have COVID-19, but they didn't disclose, his family didn't disclose the cause of death, but apparently he had suffered from Parkinson's disease in his later years. So he just proves that old adage that the good die young. Okay, this guy kept cashing in on his 15 minutes of infamy, writing books, even being an actor like the late Fred Thompson, but Fred Thompson wasn't a crook. But he was a Watergate figure. He was on the Senate Watergate committee. And he also had a talk show, long-running talk show, after he spent time in prison. Now, there's something wrong with this. Now, it's true that people could be rehabilitated in prison and all that kind of thing. But Liddy was never able to be rehabilitated. He was a psychopath, not too unlike, or a sociopath, not too unlike Roger Stone. Now, Roger Stone, the big difference here is, Roger Stone, way back during the Watergate times, was in his early 20s, and he really, or about 20, and he really wasn't a major player. Yes, he did dirty tricks, but from what I understand, Nixon's inner circle had nothing to do with him. They wanted nothing to do with him. They knew a bad apple when they saw it. But Liddy was way worse. That way. Early. Now, of course, we know Roger Stone way exceeded Gordon Liddy later on in terms of how rotten he was. But back then, Liddy was the king of the rotten individuals. And the thing with Nixon was, the one thing Richard Nixon, as president, valued above all else was loyalty from his people. And people like John Ehrlichman and H.R. Haldeman and Egil Krog and John Dean and, and dozens of others I could list. Almost all of those people were basically decent human beings. Yes, they really were. I remember when Ehrlichman and Haldeman, they were interviewed on 60 Minutes, and Ehrlichman especially, they did real tight close-ups. And I think Mike Wallace was the interviewer. They did real tight close-ups of his face to kind of make him look as guilty and as rotten and as despicable as possible. But actually, Ehrlichman's big problem was that he was loyal. He was loyal to a fault. Haldeman, the same thing. He was loyal to a fault. And, it damaged their lives. But they ended up going to prison while Nixon walked. How the hell fair was that? And other people. But the one that did belong in prison, besides Nixon, actually he needed to be tried by the Hague rather than in the regular court system of the United States. But Liddy was just bad, and he was always a bad apple. I think of Charles Colson was somewhat like Liddy in that he was kind of unscrupulous, but he got religion in prison, and then he somewhat rehabilitated himself. But Liddy, forget it. He was going to be rotten to the end. And he wrote this book called Will that I guess was his autobiography. I mean, who the hell knows if any of it was true. But he, at one point, he was bragging that he once ate a rat. He cooked it and ate it. And I thought, it's too bad that rat didn't have bubonic plague. And it could have saved the world a lot of hurt if that rat had had bubonic plague or pneumonic plague. Either one of those types. We wouldn't would never have heard of old Liddy. But Liddy somehow had a law degree, and strangely enough, he passed a background check with the FBI, so he was in there, and that was before he got involved in being the mastermind of the Watergate burglary in 1972. He was never sorry about it. Here in this CBS report, it says here, Liddy, a former FBI agent and Army veteran, was convicted of conspiracy, burglary, and illegal wiretapping for his role in the Watergate burglary, which led to the resignation of Richard Nixon. He spent 4 years and 4 months in prison, including more than 100 days in solitary confinement. And then he said, he bragged, he'd do it again for Nixon. All the while, Nixon walked around free. Didn't care. Liddy didn't care. It was just small potatoes because he got rich. He got rich, even more rich, later on, doing his idiotic talk show. Thanks to the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine, he was able to do all kinds of crap. But there was no love lost between him and John Dean. And John Dean had no use for him. And there was a lawsuit many years ago that was dismissed because they couldn't, the jury couldn't reach a verdict. But a secretary at the Democratic National Committee sued Liddy for saying that the Watergate burglars were searching Wells's desk, that was her name, Maxine Wells, or Ida Maxie Wells, for a package of call girl photos believed to include a picture of the future wife of John Dean, the former White House counsel. And then of course, he took the stand and stood by his account. Of course, there was nothing there. John Dean denied it. There was never any evidence, and of course, his wife had nothing to do with it. But and then he said, and then Liddy dismissed it from White House figures that contradicted the call girl theory. Call girl theory just went down the tubes. He made it up. Liddy made it up. Okay, that's what he did, because that's the kind of guy he was. And what a tragedy that, you know, he was a mess. He was a psychiatric mess. But John Dean, and where the hell can I find that? I think I got it over here. But there was a cryptic thing here, and I couldn't remember, maybe because I've forgotten about it all these years. John Dean responded to a post of Keith Olbermann's on Twitter. It says here, "Were Saturday Night Live still the insurrectionist force that it was? 1976, it would be reported that Liddy had died from complications from unexplained third-degree palm burns suffered half a century ago." And then John Dean writes, "Perfect explanation, but only those over 60 are very well read or Liddy fans will have a clue why. Well, I'm over 60. I am fairly well read, but I wasn't a Liddy fan, so I had either not known about it or likely I forgot about what the story was with his palm crap." And actually, I'll link this to the description, but there was a movie made that starred probably a TV movie, that starred Robert Conrad as G. Gordon Liddy, and it shows a depiction, fictionalized, of what that candle trick was. So you could see it. And really, like I said, the rat should have had bubonic plague. And I thought I would note the life of a man who was a rat eater who became a rat fucker.